GM laying out new revenue and margin targets as the company deepens its push into EVs. Let's get back to Phil LeBeau in Warren, Michigan, with the first on CNBC interview with GM CFO Paul Jacobson. Phil.
Thank you, Melissa. Let's bring in Paul Jacobson, CFO of General Motors, joining us here after taking some questions from analysts. The big question I think everybody has is you're going to double your revenue. At least that's your projection by the end of this decade. How do you get there? And should people really buy into the idea that you can get there?
Well, first of all, it's great to see you, and thanks for being here, Phil. It's really an exciting time for us, and I think you heard a lot of that excitement coming through all the senior leaders today. What we really wanted to get out today is this is a very, very different time in the auto industry and once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. And what those opportunities are going to do is lay the groundwork for us to double our revenues while expanding our margins through 2030. We're going to do that by continuing to offer the high-quality vehicles that you've seen today, that you got to experience. And also, the most important part of this is the new connected vehicle environment. So when you look at the software capabilities of the vehicle, the sheer scale and volume that General Motors is able to put out with our brands and with the flexibility of the Ultium platform, it really speaks to a huge revenue opportunity beyond the new purchase of the vehicle that is new to us. And because of that, when you look at that with $20 to $25 billion of software annual opportunities, as well as $50 billion opportunities of revenue from Cruise that we outlined today, as well as the growth in the EV portfolio, you start to see a recipe where we've got a lot of confidence in our ability to really take this to a different level.
It sounds great on paper, and I'm not trying to rain on your parade, but the stock didn't really move very much during the presentations today. And one thing I heard back from a few people is, yeah, there are a lot of ifs here. If autonomous vehicle technology takes off, if Cruise can expand as quickly as they're talking, if people will do the subscriptions in their vehicles as you're projecting them to. You have to admit, there are a lot of ifs in there.
No, that's absolutely right. But, I think what we wanted to convey today is a very different mentality. This is a growth mentality, a startup mentality, if you will, that we're incubating here. So whether you're talking about subscription services, where we've gone in very detailed customer forums, we've given data surveys as to what the products are, shown them what the cumulative effect of their purchases are, and all that is informed what we think is the attachment rate for our customers.
And in fact, you guys said you think people, on average, from your research, will spend $135 a month on their subscriptions for their vehicles.
That's what they've indicated to us with that. And the great thing about it is they had the ability to stack benefits on top of each other. So it wasn't just, oh, I like this, I don't like that. They knew at the end of the day what those effects were. But that shows the compelling value in software. And when you look at autonomous, Phil, that's what we really wanted to convey today. This is sooner than most people think. Most people think that this is far off, but I think what you heard from Dan today and the team at Cruise and what we're going to show to some investors tomorrow that are here in person is this is very real and it's here. And we see the scalability of this thing as inevitable. Now, there's going to be a lot of things along the journey, but as we look at the attachment rates, as we look at the transformation that's underway, that mentality of the confidence of being able to execute is what we want people to leave here today.
That's the potential. Let's talk about the reality right now.
Yep.
Karen Feinerman on our show brought up a good point. What's happening with the dividend? When do people say GM will reinstate the dividend to where it was, or do they say, you know what, big capital spend, that dividend is never really going to go back to where we thought it would be?
Yeah, I think consistently with what we've said, we're continuing to assess that within both the mentality of how we're thinking about the business, because we want to make sure that we've got the capital. We established that clearly today as the #1 priority is to invest capital in these opportunities. That being said, we're hearing from a lot of shareholders, and we respect the need to maintain some level of dividend. And what we've been articulating throughout the year is we want a little bit less volatility in what we see in the chips. As Mary articulated in the Q&A on our webcast, we're still seeing some week-to-week volatility. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. It's more good than bad as we start to see the trends coming out of the third quarter and into 2022. But we feel confident that we're going to continue to look at that and announce a dividend at the right time.
And that brings up my second question with regard to the chips. Mary said we're looking at a variety of options. What are some of those options on the table?
So, I think we, and as well as many others, are looking at things. So, I think you look all the way from, do you look at long-term purchase commitments, right? That's historically something that the industry has shied away from. But the reality is we know we need these. We know the manufacturers of the chips at the end of the day are facing their own pressures in terms of their customers and their ability to produce. So approaching partnerships in a new, different way, working with the engineering team to make sure that we're modifying and being able to combine chips where it's possible. A lot of strategic things, but I think the important thing is all levels of the organization, engineering, supply chain, purchasing, manufacturing, all pulling together in a way that is very special for me to see as a newcomer to the team, watching the collaboration that happens to find the best solution for our customers and for our shareholders.
$280 billion in annual revenue by 2030. You think you can get there?
I think we can get there.
Paul Jacobson, CFO of General Motors. Thank you, Paul, for joining us. Good of him to come over here after the Q&A session. Melissa, you heard it from him. He thinks they can get there. And we also got a bit of an update there on what's happening with chips and what's happening or may not be happening with the dividend. Melissa, back to you.
Phil, thanks, and thank you for asking the questions that we had on the panel here. Karen, do you feel like you got an answer?
Sort of. I think they'll reinstate a small dividend at some point. And I think that's the right answer, not a big dividend. I'm not in this for the dividend, right? If they got this giant plan with huge CapEx, go ahead, execute.
Yeah. And they have to have some sort of a dividend in order to remain in sort of the dividend-oriented funds, which you don't necessarily want to be pulled out of either. In terms of the chip shortage, I mean, it's interesting that they're looking at longer-term commitments. They're going to need those. If they really want to hit those targets in 2030, Tim, I mean, as a shareholder, I would imagine you'd be glad if they were able to secure some of the supplies necessary in order to hit those targets.
Well, they're laser focused on what their targets are, too, in terms of their growth. So, why not enter into those contracts? Also, as a shareholder, I'm happy to hear, although I pointed out where Tesla has been extraordinary, frankly, at some of their vertical integration between some of their software and hardware that has had less reliance on certain chips. I don't want to hear that GM is creating these businesses wholesale. And I think, again, locking into long-term commitments and being able to be someone that can push around the supply chain because they're that big and that important, I think is great news.